Hi, everybody, and welcome into SportsCaster.com's Open Mic. I'm your host, Johnny Kane. Really good to have you with us here over the next hour on WJR. And if you're new to the program, I think you'll appreciate what the show's all about. And that's giving a voice to the next generation of great young storytellers. You know, Sportscaster is a platform for student broadcasters, whether they're still in high school or in college, to enterprise stories that are relevant in today's sports world, and then to share those stories over the air, something that typically hasn't been available before. And one of those young voices is Ben Frakes. Ben Frakes is a student majoring in communications at Michigan State University, and he had a chance to sit down with somebody who I've come to know pretty well over the last 10 years covering Detroit Tigers baseball, although Dan Dickerson's career with the Tigers stretches deeper than that. You know, Dan's become a beloved voice here in the Detroit sports landscape, and he learned from one of the all-time greats, and not just all-time great broadcasters, one of the all-time great human beings, and that is Ernie Harwell, someone who I put on the Mount Rushmore of play-by-play voices. So Ben Frakes, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, he's a great guy to learn from, you know, and we all learn from others, as Dan obviously had an opportunity to learn from Ernie Harwell. And I always talk about when people ask about working in professional sports, depending on, what sport that is, there aren't a ton of jobs. And so there are only 30 major league teams in the world, meaning there are only 30 voices on the radio for those who narrate those games. And Dan Dickerson, who worked at WJR in the mid 90s, and then when Ernie retired at the end of the 02 season, that's when he became the full-time play-by-play announcer for the Detroit Tigers. So I know that was really the essence of your interview, was talking to him about his relationship with Harwell. What did you find out?
Yeah, well, the most interesting thing that I found, what he told me was when he first got the job in the radio booth at the Tigers, Ernie actually gave him a chance to do the very last game of the season, an inning. And, that experience for him was a big game changer in his career. Like, he really got to learn and, just do it himself, which is such a crazy opportunity.
Is there anything you learned from Dan that you'll take with you as you pursue a career in broadcasting?
I think one thing that really stood out to me was seizing the opportunity.
Here's Ben Frakes and the voice of the Tigers, Dan Dickerson.
Once you got to the Tigers organization, you had the opportunity to study and work alongside Ernie Harwell at the beginning of your time. What did you learn from that experience? How did that come about?
Working with Ernie was amazing. So, you realize there aren't obviously many of these jobs that I do, but there aren't in that small subset of people who are doing this job, play-by-play or analyst for the team they grew up watching. It's an even smaller number, right? There aren't many. So it's pretty neat that I get to do these games for the team that I grew up watching. So I grew up listening to Ernie Harwell. And he just made you want to listen to games. And that's why I love baseball and radio, because it doesn't matter, or it matters whether the team is good or not. But I always wanted to listen even in the bad years. And believe me, in the 70s, there were some pretty lean years. But the 68 season got me hooked on baseball and the radio. There weren't many games on TV back then. I just loved how he called a game. I loved how he sounded. And then to get to work with him in 2000 was just amazing. I mean, we were doing pre and post game for Tigers. Steve Courtney and I with Tom Mazaway. So I was at the ballpark. I'd gotten in touch with the Tigers, or just let them know, hey, if Ernie's ever sick or misses a game, he'd miss like 2 in 50 years. I'm here practicing, ready to step in if need be. And that didn't ever come about. But what happened was in that last game at Tiger Stadium, this is a long story, but long story short, because we were there doing pre and post, and the last game at Tiger Stadium was, a big deal. It was on WJR, 6 a.m. to midnight coverage for the last game, wall-to-wall coverage. So I got a chance to sit in with Ernie for the last 3 innings because Jim Price, my partner for a long time, and his partner at the time was going to get ready for the post-game ceremony. And then Ernie gave me 1 inning of play-by-play in those last 3 innings, which is amazing. Every time I think about it, I mean, this is last 3 innings on a historic day, and he's giving one of them to me. That helped get me in the booth the next year when they decided they wanted to add a third person to the booth. it was the first time they'd ever had a 3-man booth. It was always a 2-man booth, but they wanted to add somebody for the middle 3 innings of play-by-play. And that's how I got in. And then being able to sit by him or sit next to him and watch, why did he sound so good the last broadcast in 2002 as he did any other year I can remember listening? Because he just loved what he did, and he loved the people around the game, and he just brought that energy to the ballpark every day. And it's like, well, okay. So in my first year when I'm like, oh, can I do this over 162? Just being around him really helped set me up for success when he retired. And then I got to be the guy who was the main play-by-play guy after that. He was just so kind to me, and so helped me get into the booth and help me on my way to the booth.
Well, from that time to now, this upcoming season will be your 26th as the radio broadcaster for the Detroit Tigers. Would you say that you've changed over that time as a broadcaster?
I hope I've gotten better. That's truly, you just, from the start, it's just like, that's why I love the job. It's a constant challenge. I love describing a game well, and that's the job on radio. It's very different on TV, but I love doing that. And every game is a challenge to do it well. And I'll never attain probably the level I want, but it's fun to try to get there. But the evolution is, to me, it's always been the same way to prepare, right? I want all the information. I want way too much. But that's to me a better way. I think Dick Enberg described it one time. You'd rather have way too much because you're only going to use a tiny percentage of the stuff you prepared. But it's that preparation. It's all the stuff you don't use that makes the broadcast better. It sounds kind of weird, but what he means is, instead of saying, oh, I've got this much stuff to pick and choose from about what we're going to talk about tonight versus this much stuff where you can pick and choose and you don't have to use it all, that makes it a better broadcast. And that's kind of how I've always looked at it. And then it becomes, how do you blend it? And that makes it endlessly interesting to me, that every night the information is going to fit together a little bit differently. You never know where your conversation with your analyst is going to go. He might take you in a completely different direction, and then you got to be ready for that. So that's the beauty and the fun, and to me, the kind of the art of the radio style of play-by-play and the radio broadcast. You're weaving it all together, and so then I've always been a numbers guy. So a real challenge for me is to, how do you blend all the new numbers? I want to make sure that I'm up on the new numbers, but you cannot ever overstat a broadcast. You will lose people. So my job then becomes, and everybody who does this, filtering, okay, what's useful among this information to help us understand what makes this guy good or where he's struggling, but also leads to conversations with coaches, managers, players about what they're working on, or how hard it is to hit in Major League Baseball. That's how I like to use the numbers, but that's a constant process. It's like, okay, what's useful? What helps us tell the story of what's going on in front of us? What adds some insight into this great game of baseball?
I understand that you and Jason Benetti just broadcasted a game together for the first time recently.
Yeah.
I was wondering how that went.
Had a blast. Yeah. Jason he's added so much to, it really is a broadcast team when you're talking about TV and radio guys, because, with some of us, we go back and forth, all of us, right, on both sides. But it just, his joining this, organization last year was just the best. He's such a great personality, great person. He's funny. He's smart. We're very different in our styles. And I love that. It led to a podcast that I've really enjoyed. We go about it, again, very differently. I'm kind of the guy who likes to follow a logical line of questioning. And here's Jason coming in from left field, and he's going to throw a question at you like, what's your favorite color, M&M or something? And it leads to, a funny little diversion, but also we're both trying to get to the same spot, because the podcast is all about, origin stories and how did you get to where you are. So I love working with him. I love seeing him every day.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a very entertaining broadcast. I wish I got the chance to listen to it. Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, so you've been covering this Tigers team this year. I'm wondering if you've seen enough from the players in Lakeland this season to say that last year's success wasn't just a fluke.
Oh no, it was definitely not a fluke. And I think the biggest thing that came out of last year was, at the end, we talked about the belief that was instilled in this team. They just never stopped believing. But that's not just a 42 game stretch where they go 31-11. That's the way that AJ and this staff have prepared these guys for the last 3 years leading up to that stretch. And what does that get back to? That gets back to you've prepared to win one game on this day. And AJ makes fun of himself saying that sounds like coach speak. But when you realize all that goes into preparing to win one game on one day and not think about, oh, we need to get hot here, we need to win 10 out of 12 to get back in this thing, then you realize, okay, what does my routine look like that day? How's my game planning? What's my approach in every single at bat? And you could just see this team once that kind of clicked. They got a younger, more athletic lineup. Joey Cora challenged them to, hey, run first to third a few times, will you? I want you over here at third base. And seriously, the number of players who mentioned that, but that little thing, because that's a sign of a good base running team that goes first to third. All of a sudden, they're getting very aggressive. They were like at a 50% clip first to third in August after that challenge from Joey Cora. League average is about 1 in 3 opportunities, right? But that was the style of play. You were forcing mistakes on the other side. You're making that outfielder look up as he's fielding the ball. It led to this energy and a style of play down the stretch. It led to good defense. The pitching was ridiculous. That made it all fun. And those are the kinds of things you take into this year. There's never momentum from the end of one season to the next. But what it does is help your off-season workouts. Oh, I've got a taste of the postseason now. I want that again. That can lead to that little more energy in the off-season. As Scott Harris always says, you've got to get better in the off-season. But it also helps you going into the season. It's like, okay, we know now what it takes to win every day. They don't talk about hot starts or slow starts. It's more of the carryover is going to be, we experienced that. We experienced the pressure of the postseason. We actually went 4-3 in the postseason. And now that's what helps you coming into this year. As long as you've got talent, I think all of that adds up to, you can build on what you did last year.
That type of hunger, that type of hustle is a great characteristic. Yeah. Is there a team that you've covered in the past that reminds you of this team, this 2025 squad?
No, it was kind of different because some of the best teams were led by Miguel Cabrera, and they kind of mashed the ball even before he got here in 2006. Obviously, they had good pitching like 2012, 2013. It was amazing. But in terms of the base running, this team had to kind of live. They talk about it all the time, live at the margins, right? You find those incremental, every 90 feet that you gain and prevent. That's how this team is going to win because they're not going to mash like the best teams that Jim Leland had. And what they can do is pitch, but pitching is also run prevention is pitching plus defense, right? And they had one of their better defensive teams last year. So it's really paying attention to the details that make you good in all areas. That kind of separates it from other teams. Obviously, there have been better teams that I've called, but the brand of baseball and how they went about it, I think was unique.
Interesting. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Ben, you are welcome. Looking forward to this season. It's going to be fun.
I love what Dan says about wanting all the information. You'd always rather have too much information. And really, you could have the best voice on the planet, but if your preparation is lacking, it doesn't matter. And the great ones are able to blend those numbers and the information effortlessly into a broadcast. And it reminds me of what the great Vin Scully once said. He said, statistics are used much like a drunk uses a lamppost for support, not illumination.